Her husband hit her in the street. The cowboy stepped in and said, "Not as long as I live." The dust of Serenity Creek, Arizona territory, tasted like blood and shame. The afternoon sun, relentless and unforgiving, burned down on Eleanor Vance as she staggered back, her vision blurred by a veil of crimson that trickled from a gash above her eye. The year was 1881, and in this desolate patch of frontier land, a woman's pain was often seen as her husband's private business. Eleanor, at just 22, had learned this bitter truth through 3 years of marriage that had twisted from a hopeful beginning into a daily torment of fear and violence. She knew she should have stayed silent, but the bitter words, a defense of her own shattered dignity, had slipped out, and now she was paying the price. Her husband, Silas Thorne, stood over her, his face a mask of drunken fury, his large frame swaying slightly as he raised his fist again. "You dare to talk back to me in front of these people? I swear to God I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." The words were slurred, thick with cheap whiskey and venom. Eleanor scrambled on the ground, her worn calico dress now a mess of dirt and blood, her long dark hair having come loose from its bun. "Please, Silas," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. She was acutely aware of the townsfolk who had stopped their business to watch, their eyes either curious or quickly averted. No one would intervene. The unspoken rule in Serenity Creek was simple: a man's domain, a man's wife, a man's business. Silas lunged forward, his powerful hand clamping around her arm with a force that threatened to shatter bone. "Get up. You think I'm done with you. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming." His cruel laughter echoed in the sudden silence of the street. It was the laugh of a predator who knows its prey has nowhere to run. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut, preparing for the inevitable blow, but it never came. Instead, a voice, calm and steady, cut through the tension like a keen blade. "Let her go." Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. A tall, imposing silhouette stood against the setting sun, his broad shoulders seeming to block out the harsh light. He stepped forward, and as he moved, she could make out the details. A dark, wide-brimmed hat, the worn-out, faded blue of a denim shirt, and eyes that held the cold, hard, and brilliant hue of a winter sky. A stranger, she had never seen him before. He had the quiet, deliberate way of a man who knew his own power and was not afraid to use it. The hand resting on his holstered revolver was a casual, almost lazy gesture, yet it held a certain promise of danger. "This ain't your concern, mister," Silas snarled, his grip on Eleanor's arm tightening painfully. The stranger's boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he closed the distance between them. When a man beats a woman in the street, it becomes everyone's concern. His voice was low, carrying no trace of emotion, but its controlled power sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. "Let her go. Now." Silas let out a harsh, contemptuous laugh. "Or what? This is my wife. I'll handle her how I please." The stranger's expression remained unchanged, his gaze never wavering from Silas's eyes. "Not while I'm breathing." Those 4 words hung in the air, a final, unyielding challenge. The crowd of onlookers, which had grown with the passing minutes, fell completely silent. The only sound was the far-off clinking of a blacksmith's hammer and the wind whistling through the dry, high desert air. Eleanor felt her heart pounding against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and a new, bewildering emotion. Hope. No one had ever stood up for her before, not against Frank. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified at what might happen next. She couldn't bring herself to run. This was happening to her, and she was frozen in place. Silas finally released her arm, pushing her roughly to the side as he squared up to the stranger. His voice dripped with arrogant menace. "Who the hell do you think you are, coming into my town and getting in my business?" "Name's Caleb O'Connell," the stranger replied, removing his hand from his gun and instead crossing his arms across his broad chest in a deliberate show of calm. "Just rode into town looking for a quiet place to get a drink and a place to rest my head. Wasn't expecting to find a coward beating on a lady." Silas's face contorted into a dangerous shade of crimson. "Coward? I'll kill you where you stand." His hand dropped to the rusty revolver at his hip, but before he could draw, Caleb moved with an astonishing speed that belied his calm demeanor. A swift, economic strike to Silas's wrist sent the gun clattering into the dirt, and a second blow to his stomach doubled him over, a pathetic, wheezing sound escaping his lips. Silas stumbled backward, grasping at his gut. "That's enough." Marshal Hayes's voice boomed as he pushed his way through the crowd, hand on his own pistol. He was a good man, fair and respected, but his hands were often tied by the unwritten rules of the town. "What in blazes is going on here?" Silas, still gasping for air, pointed an accusing finger at Caleb. "This stranger attacked me. He came at me for no reason." The marshal's eyes moved from Silas's contorted face to Caleb's unruffled one, then finally to Eleanor, who still knelt on the ground, a hand pressed to her bruised cheek. The marshal's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Vance, are you all right?" For the first time in years, Eleanor felt the gaze of a man who was not full of judgment or possessiveness, but of concern. 3 years of silence, 3 years of fear, warred with the sudden, overwhelming possibility of speaking the truth. She looked at Caleb, the man who had stepped between her and harm without a moment's thought, and something inside her, a small, dormant flame of courage, ignited. "My husband hit me, Marshal," she said, her voice stronger than she expected, though still trembling. "This man—" He stopped him. Marshal Hayes sighed heavily, running a hand over his tired face. "Silas, you've been drinking again. You go sleep it off at the boarding house tonight. I won't have you causing more trouble." "She's my wife." "You can't," Silas protested, stumbling to his feet. "I can. And I am," the marshal said, his voice flat with authority. "Now you go, or you'll spend the night in my jail. Your choice." Silas glared at Eleanor with such a pure, concentrated hatred that she involuntarily stepped back, a shiver of dread running down her spine. "This isn't over," he hissed, the words a promise of future violence, before he stumbled away down the dusty street. The crowd, their entertainment concluded, began to disperse. As the marshal walked away, Eleanor found herself alone with the man who had risked his life for her. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight flecks of gray in his dark brown hair. He wasn't young, perhaps around 35, but there was a quiet strength in him that made age irrelevant. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice still shaky. "But you shouldn't have done that. Silas, he won't forget this." Caleb studied her face, not with pity, Eleanor noted with surprise, but with a quiet respect that she hadn't felt in years. "Some things a man can't just ride past, ma'am. You have somewhere safe to go?" Eleanor straightened her shoulders, a newfound dignity rising within her. "My sister's place. It's just down the street." Caleb nodded. "I'll walk you there." They moved in silence through the dusty street, the town's watchful eyes following them from behind closed windows and half-open doorways. Eleanor could feel their gazes, their judgments, and their gossip. By morning, everyone would know what had happened. The thought made her stomach clench with anxiety. "I don't know this town," Caleb said eventually. "Is there law here that works, or just a man with a badge?" Eleanor gave a small, bitter laugh. "Marshal Hayes is a good man. But around here, what happens between a husband and wife," she trailed off, "isn't considered anyone else's business," Caleb finished for her. "I've seen that thinking before." They reached a small, tidy house at the edge of town. Before Eleanor could knock, the door flew open and her younger sister, Lydia, a woman with the same dark hair but a sharper, more protective gaze, rushed out. "Eleanor, Mrs. Higgins told me what happened." She embraced Eleanor carefully, her eyes wide with fear, before turning a suspicious look on Caleb. "Who is this?" "Lydia, this is Mr. O'Connell. He helped me when Silas—" Eleanor couldn't finish, her throat tight with emotion. Understanding dawned on Lydia's face. She looked at Caleb with a mixture of gratitude and caution. "Come inside, both of you, quickly." The interior of the small home was modest but clean. A pot of stew bubbled on the stove, filling the air with a savory aroma that reminded Eleanor she hadn't eaten since morning. Lydia pointed to a wooden chair. "Sit." She dipped a cloth in cool water and gently began to clean the dirt and blood from Eleanor's face. "Did he hurt you anywhere else?" Eleanor shook her head, embarrassed by Caleb's presence during such an intimate moment. "Just my pride." "Pride heals," Caleb said quietly from where he stood by the door, hat in hand. "But you should tell the marshal everything, not just about today." Eleanor stiffened, looking at him in confusion. "What do you mean? This wasn't the first time, was it?" Caleb's voice was gentle, but knowing. Lydia's eyes flashed angrily. "It's been going on for over a year. I've begged her to leave him." "Lydia, please," Eleanor whispered, mortified. "No, Eleanor. Someone finally stood up for you today. Maybe it's time you listened." Lydia turned to Caleb, her voice sincere. "Thank you for what you did, Mr. O'Connell. Not many would interfere." Caleb nodded. "I should go find a place for the night." "The Serenity Creek Inn has clean rooms," Lydia suggested, "and they don't ask too many questions." As Caleb turned to leave, Eleanor suddenly called out, "Mr. O'Connell." When he looked back, she continued, "Silas, he doesn't forget slights, and he has friends. Please be careful." A slight smile crossed Caleb's face, softening the hard lines. "I always am, Mrs. Vance. You do the same." After he left, Lydia sat across from her sister. "Eleanor, this can't go on. Silas will kill you one day." Eleanor stared at her bruised hands. "What choice do I have? I have no money, no profession. The law says everything I own belongs to him." "You could leave, go to Aunt Martha's, and live as what? A charity case? A failed wife?" Eleanor shook her head, tears finally beginning to fall. "This is my life now." Lydia reached across the table and gripped her sister's hands. "Only if you choose it to be." That night, Eleanor lay awake on her sister's spare bed, replaying the events of the day. The public humiliation, yes, but also the unexpected intervention of a stranger. "Not while I'm breathing." Such simple words, yet they had changed everything. For the first time in years, Eleanor allowed herself to imagine a different future than the one she had resigned herself to. A future where she could be more than just Silas's wife, a piece of his property. The morning sun cast long, dusty shadows across the main street of Serenity Creek as Eleanor and Lydia sat at their small kitchen table, a map of the Arizona Territory spread between them. The map, old and faded, had been Lydia's, a relic from her days as a schoolteacher's assistant, a reminder of the world beyond their small, suffocating town. The night before, after much whispered conversation, they had agreed on a plan, a risky, perhaps foolhardy plan, but the only one they could see. It involved not just escaping Silas, but making him agree to let her go forever. A legal, binding release. "This is insane, Eleanor," Lydia whispered, tracing a finger along the border of the territory. "You could be killed." "I could be killed if I stay," Eleanor said, her voice thin but resolute. "We both know it. He'll find me wherever I go. We have to end this, for good." A knock at the door startled them both. It was Cal, looking less dusty than the day before, his presence filling the small space. He held his hat in his hands. "Mrs. Vance, Mrs. Moore, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Mr. O'Connell," Lydia said, her voice a little too formal, a silent acknowledgement of the rumors already swirling about him. "Come in. Eleanor was just telling me about her plan." Cal's eyes met Eleanor's, and she saw in them a quiet understanding. "Good. We need a plan, and I have some information that might help." He explained that he'd spent the morning asking around, listening to the gossip that traveled faster than a speeding bullet in towns like Serenity Creek. He'd heard about Silas's gambling problem, about the debts he owed to a ruthless gang of loan sharks known as the Rattlesnake Boys, and about the dark whispers surrounding the death of Silas's first wife. "They say she fell from her horse, but there were rumors of broken bones that don't fit that story," Cal said, his voice low. A cold feeling settled in Eleanor's stomach. She had heard the whispers too, but had never dared to believe them. Now, hearing them from a man who had no reason to lie, they took on a horrifying new reality. "He did it," she breathed. "He killed her." "We don't know that," Cal said gently, "but it's enough to use as leverage. It's a risk, but it might be our only way out. We can't just rely on the marshal." They spent the next few hours crafting their strategy. It was a simple, brutal equation. Silas cared about three things: his pride, his reputation, and his freedom. They would use all three against him. Eleanor, with the money she had secretly saved from selling small embroidery works to the local seamstress, would pay off his debts to the Rattlesnake Boys. In return, he would publicly agree to the divorce. Cal would be her backup, her silent threat. Lydia was terrified, but she trusted Cal's instincts and Eleanor's newfound determination. "He'll be at the Double Diamond Saloon," Lydia said. "He spends every afternoon there, drinking and running his mouth." "Then that's where we go," Eleanor said, a calm she hadn't felt in years settling over her. The Double Diamond Saloon was crowded even at midday, filled with miners, drifters, and cowboys. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer and sawdust. Silas was at a corner table, playing poker with three other men. His back was to the door, but he looked up when the sudden silence of the room alerted him to their presence. His eyes widened when he saw Eleanor, her hair neatly pinned, her simple blue dress looking strangely dignified, his face contorted in a sneer. "Well, well," he spat, throwing down his cards. "The wayward wife returns. Come to beg forgiveness?" Eleanor walked directly to his table, every eye in the saloon fixed on her. "No, Silas, I've come to offer you a deal." He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "A deal? You've got nothing to offer, woman." "I want a divorce," Eleanor said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the now silent saloon, "and I'm willing to pay for it." Silas's laughter died in his throat. He looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "There will be no divorce. Now get out of here before I teach you another lesson about respect." Marshal Hayes stepped forward from where he had been standing by the door. "That's enough, Silas. Hear her out." Silas's eyes narrowed as he took in the marshal, Cal, and Lydia, arrayed behind Eleanor. "What is this? Some kind of ambush?" "This is me giving you a choice," Eleanor said, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice remaining firm. "You get two things if you agree to this right now, in front of all these witnesses. First, this." She placed a small, leather pouch on the table. The clinking of coins inside made Silas's eyebrows rise. "That's $300, every penny I've saved in secret over the past 3 years. It's yours, for a fresh start." Silas reached for the pouch, but Eleanor was faster, snatching it back. "Not yet. First, you agree publicly to let me go." "And why would I do that?" Silas sneered, but his eyes lingered on the pouch, the greed warring with his pride. "Because of the second part of the deal," Cal said, stepping forward, his voice a quiet rumble that commanded attention. "Marshal Hayes here has some interesting questions about your first wife's death and about certain debts you've failed to pay. Seems the Rattlesnake Boys are particularly interested in collecting what you owe them." Silas's face paled slightly. The Rattlesnake Boys were known for their violent methods, and he knew they wouldn't hesitate to collect on their debts. "This is blackmail," he hissed. "This is a business arrangement," Eleanor corrected him. "You give me my freedom, you get money and a fresh start somewhere else. You refuse, and by sundown, you'll have both the law and the Rattlesnake Boys looking for you." Silas's eyes darted around the saloon, taking in the dozens of witnesses to his humiliation. He looked from Eleanor to Cal, then back to the money pouch, his hand clenched and unclenched on the table. "You think I care what these people think? You're my wife, mine to do with as I please." "Not anymore," Eleanor said softly. "Not while Mr. O'Connell is breathing. And not while I'm finally standing up for myself." A tense silence filled the saloon. Even the bartender had stopped wiping glasses to watch the confrontation unfold. Finally, Silas's shoulders sagged in a defeated slump. "Fine," he spat. "You want freedom? Take it. You were always more trouble than you were worth." Eleanor placed the money pouch on the table. "Say it clearly, Silas. In front of everyone." Silas's jaw worked as he struggled with his pride. Finally, he stood, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. "I, Silas Thorne, hereby release Eleanor Vance from our marriage. I want nothing more to do with her. She is no longer my wife." He snatched up the pouch and stuffed it into his pocket. "Satisfied?" he sneered. "Almost." Marshal Hayes said. He placed a document on the table. "Sign this. It's a statement renouncing all claims on Mrs. Vance and agreeing to a divorce on grounds of abandonment. By you." Silas looked like he might explode, but after glancing at Cal's steady, unwavering gaze, he grabbed the pen and scrawled his signature. "There. Now, leave me be." "One more thing," Eleanor said, her voice quiet but firm. "You'll leave Serenity Creek today and never return. You can't force me to." "The stage to Tucson leaves at noon," Marshal Hayes interrupted. "I strongly suggest you be on it, unless you'd prefer to discuss your gambling debts with the Rattlesnake Boys in person." Silas glared at them all, a cold, burning hatred in his eyes. But he was beaten, and he knew it. Without another word, he stalked from the saloon, shoving past Eleanor hard enough to make her stumble. As the door swung shut behind him, a weight seemed to lift from Eleanor's shoulders. She turned to find the entire saloon staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to admiration. Cal stood beside her, a small, proud smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You did it," he said softly. Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling truly free for the first time in years. "We did it." If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. The following weeks brought a dramatic, dizzying change to Eleanor's life. True to the Marshal's prediction, Silas left on the noon stage, though not before spreading vicious rumors about Eleanor and the interfering cowboy who had stolen his wife. But to Silas's obvious disappointment, the townsfolk largely sided with Eleanor. The public beating had turned many against him, and Eleanor's quiet dignity in the aftermath won her surprising support. With Lydia's encouragement, Eleanor used a small portion of her remaining savings to rent a tiny room above the milliner's shop and took a position as an assistant to the town's seamstress, Mrs. Whitman. Her skilled needlework quickly made her indispensable, and for the first time, she had money that was truly her own. It was a small amount, barely enough to live on, but it was hers, and the freedom it represented was worth more than gold. She began to sew for herself, creating a simple, elegant blue dress that made her feel, for the first time, beautiful. Cal continued working at the Johnson Ranch, riding into town most Sundays to attend church. It was something he admitted he hadn't done regularly in years. Invariably, he would find a reason to visit Eleanor afterward, sometimes bringing a small gift: wildflowers he'd picked on his ride, a small ribbon for her hair, or once, a beautiful hand-carved wooden comb. They developed a friendship that was careful, proper, but undeniably warm. The town's watchful eyes were on them, and Eleanor was conscious of the scrutiny. A woman separated but not yet divorced was still subject to scrutiny, but she found herself caring less about the gossip with each passing day. The public display of her new freedom at the saloon had been both terrifying and liberating, and she was no longer willing to shrink from the world. "You look different," Lydia observed one Sunday afternoon as they shared tea in Eleanor's small room. "Happier, younger, even." Eleanor touched her cheek, now healed completely. "I feel different, like I can breathe again." "And does a certain cowboy have anything to do with that?" Lydia teased. Eleanor felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Cal has been a good friend, nothing more." "But you'd like it to be more," Lydia persisted. "Anyone with eyes can see how you look at each other." "It's complicated," Eleanor sighed. "I'm still technically married, and I don't know if I'll ever be ready to trust a man again. Not after Silas." "Cal isn't Silas," Lydia said gently. "Not all men are monsters, Eleanor." "I know that. But—" Eleanor struggled to articulate her fears. "What if I'm drawn to the wrong kind? What if there's something in me that brings out the worst in a husband?" Lydia reached across the table to squeeze her sister's hand. "What Silas did was never your fault. Never." Eleanor nodded, though the doubt lingered. After Lydia left, she sat by her small window, watching the street below as the town prepared for evening. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, but slowly. Judge Parker only traveled through Serenity Creek once every few months, and the next circuit wasn't due for another 6 weeks. A knock at her door roused her from her thoughts. Opening it, she found Cal standing there, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Mr. O'Connell, this is a surprise. Mrs. Vance," he cleared his throat. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all. Please, come in." She stepped aside, suddenly conscious of the room's cramped dimensions and simple furnishings. Cal entered, his tall frame making the space seem even smaller. "I can't stay long, Mrs. Johnson has asked me to escort her to Prescott tomorrow on business, and we leave at first light." "Oh." Eleanor tried to hide her disappointment. "How long will you be gone?" "A week, maybe 2. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I wanted to give you this before I left." He extended his hand, revealing a small silver locket on a delicate chain. Eleanor's breath caught. "Cal, I couldn't possibly." "Please. It was my mother's." He opened it to reveal a tiny pressed flower inside. "Desert primrose. They bloom after the harshest conditions, surviving where nothing else can." His eyes met hers. "It reminded me of you." Eleanor's heart fluttered as she accepted the gift. "It's beautiful. Thank you. I was hoping, when I return, perhaps we could speak more openly about certain things." "What things?" she asked, though she knew perfectly well what he meant. Cal stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that always seemed to surround him. "About the future. My future. And if you're willing, perhaps a future we might share." Eleanor looked up into his face, seeing hope and uncertainty there in equal measure. This good man, who had stepped between her and harm without a thought for his own safety, was offering her his heart. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. "I would like that conversation very much," she said softly. "When you return." Cal's smile transformed his usually serious face. Gently, he took the locket from her hand and moved behind her to fasten it around her neck. His fingers were surprisingly gentle for a working cowboy, brushing lightly against her skin as he secured the clasp. Eleanor closed her eyes at the contact, a shiver running through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Until then," he murmured, stepping back respectfully. After he left, Eleanor touched the locket at her throat, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. For the first time since her ill-fated wedding day, she allowed herself to imagine a different kind of marriage, one built on respect and kindness rather than possession and fear. The days of Cal's absence stretched long before her. Eleanor threw herself into her work at the seamstress shop, grateful for the distraction. News arrived that Silas had been seen in Tucson, apparently heading south toward Mexico. The knowledge that he was truly gone from her life should have brought only relief. But Eleanor found herself unexpectedly pensive. Not because she missed Silas, she didn't, but because his absence forced her to confront the emptiness in her life that predated him. "You're miles away today, Mrs. Whitman observed as Eleanor stitched a wedding dress for the banker's daughter. "Something troubling you?" Eleanor smiled apologetically. "Just thinking about the past and the future." The older woman nodded knowingly. "Thinking about that handsome cowboy who's been calling on you, more like." Eleanor felt herself blush. "Is it that obvious? To these old eyes?" "Yes." Mrs. Whitman adjusted her spectacles. "But it does my heart good to see after what that brute put you through. You deserve some happiness." "I'm not sure I know what would make me happy anymore," Eleanor admitted. "For so long, I just focused on surviving each day. That's how it goes sometimes." Mrs. Whitman's needle flashed in the sunlight streaming through the shop window. "We get so used to the storm that we don't know what to do when the sun comes out." 2 weeks passed with no word from Cal. Eleanor tried not to worry. Travel in the territories was unpredictable at best, and the road to Prescott was known for delays. Still, each day that passed without his return left her more anxious. Then, on a stormy afternoon when thunder rolled across the valley, the shop door burst open to reveal Lydia, her face ashen. "Eleanor, you need to come quickly. It's Cal. He's been hurt." Eleanor's heart seemed to stop. "Hurt? How? Where is he?" "At Doc Evans' office. He and Mrs. Johnson were ambushed on their return journey. Robbers, they think." Eleanor barely heard the rest as she grabbed her shawl and rushed into the rain-soaked street, her mind filled with terrible possibilities as she ran toward the doctor's small office at the edge of town. Was Cal dying? Was he already gone? The thought of losing him before they'd even had a chance to begin something together was unbearable. "Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. It's easy to forget, but staying hydrated is crucial for your health. Also, if you've been sitting for a while, do a quick lap around the room and give your eyes a break from the screen. Your body will thank you." The doctor's assistant, a young man named Timothy, looked up in surprise as Eleanor burst through the door, rain dripping from her clothes and hair. "Mrs. Vance, you're soaked through." "Where is he?" Eleanor demanded, ignoring the comment. "Where's Caleb O'Connell?" "In the back room, but the doctor is with him now." And Eleanor pushed past him, her fear overwhelming any sense of propriety. The back room was small, dominated by an examination table where Cal lay shirtless, his torso wrapped in bandages. Dr. Evans looked up from his work with a frown. "Mrs. Vance, this is highly irregular." "Let her stay, Doc," Cal said weakly, his eyes finding Eleanor's. "Please." The doctor sighed, but stepped back, allowing Eleanor to approach. She moved to Cal's side, taking in his pale face, the bruise darkening his left temple, and the blood-stained bandages wrapped around his midsection. "What happened?" she whispered, taking his hand. "Ambush," Cal replied, wincing as he shifted slightly. "5 men stopped our wagon about 10 miles outside of town. They were waiting for us." "Waiting specifically?" Eleanor asked, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. Cal's eyes met hers, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "Yes. They called me by name before they even saw my face. Said they had a message from Silas Thorne." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Silas did this, but he's in Mexico by now. Apparently not far enough that he couldn't hire men to settle his score." Cal attempted a smile that turned into a grimace of pain. "Don't worry, they look worse than I do." "Barely," Dr. Evans muttered. 2 bullet wounds, 3 broken ribs, and a concussion. It's a miracle you made it back to town at all." "Mrs. Johnson," Eleanor suddenly remembered. Shaken, but unharmed, the doctor assured her. They weren't interested in her. "Just Mr. O'Connell here." Eleanor felt sick with guilt. "This is my fault. All of it. Silas would never have come after you if not for me." Cal's grip on her hand tightened. "No. This is Silas's doing, not yours. Never yours." Dr. Evans cleared his throat. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. O'Connell needs rest now. You can return in the morning." "I'm staying," Eleanor said with uncharacteristic firmness. "All night if I need to." The doctor looked like he might argue, then sighed in resignation. "As you wish, but try not to excite him. Those bullet wounds were deep and he's lost a lot of blood." After the doctor left, Eleanor pulled a chair close to Cal's bedside. Rain pattered against the window as twilight deepened into night. She held his hand, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Each breath was a reassurance that he lived. "You should go home," Cal said eventually, his voice rough with pain. "Get some rest." "No." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I won't leave you." "Stubborn woman," he murmured, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "I learned from the best." She reached out to brush a lock of hair from his forehead. "Why did you do it, Cal, that first day in the street? Why risk yourself for a stranger?" He was silent for so long that Eleanor thought he might have drifted to sleep. Finally, he spoke, his voice so low she had to lean closer to hear. "My mother," he said. "My father was like Silas, violent, cruel. He beat her regularly, and no one ever stepped in. Not once in all those years." His jaw tightened at the memory. She died from it eventually. A blow to the head that caused bleeding inside her skull. "I was 14. Eleanor's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry. I promised myself then that I'd never stand by and watch a woman suffer if I could help it." His eyes, though clouded with pain, held hers intently. "When I saw Silas hit you that day, I wasn't really seeing him. I was seeing my father. And you were seeing your mother." Eleanor finished for him. Cal nodded slightly. "At first, but then I got to know you, Eleanor. Your strength, your kindness. And I started seeing just you." Eleanor felt tears well in her eyes. She leaned forward and, after a moment's hesitation, pressed her lips gently to his forehead. "Rest now. We can talk more tomorrow." Cal closed his eyes, his breathing gradually deepening as he drifted into sleep. Eleanor maintained her vigil through the night, thinking about the path that had brought them both to this moment. Two wounded souls finding in each other something neither had dared hope for, a second chance. Morning brought Dr. Evans back to check Cal's wounds. "The fever's down," he announced after his examination. "If we can prevent infection, he should recover fully, given time and rest." "How much time?" Cal asked, clearly already impatient with confinement. "At least 2 weeks before you even think about getting back on a horse," the doctor said sternly. And that's being optimistic. After the doctor left, Eleanor helped Cal sit up to take some broth. "You heard him. 2 weeks of rest." "I can't stay here that long," Cal protested. "Doc Evans needs this room for other patients, and I need to get back to the Johnson ranch." "Mrs. Johnson already sent word that your job will be waiting when you're well," Eleanor interrupted. "And as for where you'll stay," she hesitated, then continued with determination, "you'll come to my place." Cal's eyebrows rose. "Eleanor, people would talk." "Let them," she lifted her chin. "Lydia will stay with us as a chaperone if that makes you feel better. But you need someone to look after you, and I need to know you're safe." The truth was, Eleanor couldn't bear the thought of Cal being vulnerable, while Silas's hired men might still be looking to finish the job. Her small room above the milliner's shop was easily defensible with only one staircase for access, and she and Lydia could take turns keeping watch. Cal studied her face, seeing the fierce determination there. "All right," he conceded finally, "but only until I can stand without feeling like I'm going to pass out." 3 days later, with the help of Marshal Hayes and the doctor's assistant, they moved Cal to Eleanor's room. The small space became even more cramped, with the addition of a cot for Cal and a pallet on the floor for Lydia. But Eleanor didn't mind the closeness. For the first time since leaving Silas, she felt something like a family surrounding her. Cal proved to be a difficult patient, constantly trying to do more than his healing body would allow. Eleanor found herself alternately scolding and encouraging him, developing a comfortable familiarity that would have scandalized Serenity Creek's more conservative residents if they had witnessed it. But behind the closed door of her room, with Lydia as their buffer against impropriety, Eleanor discovered a new version of herself emerging, one who laughed easily, spoke her mind, and gradually allowed her heart to open to possibilities she had thought forever closed to her. As the days passed, Cal's strength returned. He began taking short walks with Eleanor around the room, then down the stairs, and eventually along the main street of town. The townsfolk, who had initially raised eyebrows at the arrangement, gradually accepted the sight of the injured cowboy and the soon-to-be divorced woman walking arm in arm. It helped that Marshal Hayes made a point of tipping his hat to them publicly, conferring his tacit approval on their unusual situation. "The circuit judge arrives next week," Eleanor mentioned one evening as she changed Cal's bandages. "His wounds were healing well, the angry red lines fading to pink. Marshal Hayes says he'll put my case forward immediately." Cal watched her face as she worked, her fingers gentle against his skin. "Are you ready for it? To be truly free of Silas?" "More than ready," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "Though I admit I'm nervous about facing a judge." "You've faced down worse," Cal reminded her. "Much worse." Eleanor secured the fresh bandage and sat back, studying him. In the 3 weeks of his recovery, she had come to know every line of his face, the exact shade of his eyes, the way his voice deepened when he spoke of things that mattered to him. She had also noticed how carefully he maintained a certain physical distance between them, never overstepping the boundaries of propriety despite their unusual living arrangement. "Cal," she said suddenly, "when the divorce is final, what happens then?" He met her gaze steadily. "What do you want to happen?" The directness of the question took her by surprise. Eleanor had spent so many years subduing her own desires that identifying them now felt almost foreign. But in the quiet of the evening, with Lydia out visiting a friend, and no one to hear but the man who had changed the course of her life, she found the courage to speak the truth. "I want to start a new life," she said softly. one where I make my own choices, where I'm valued as a person, not possessed as property." She touched the silver locket he had given her, which she had worn every day since his return. "And I think I want you to be part of that life." Cal's expression softened. He reached out, his calloused hand covering hers where it rested on the locket. "I want that too, Eleanor, more than I've wanted anything in a very long time." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But I need you to be sure, after what you've been through with Silas, I'd understand if you never wanted to marry again." "I thought the same thing," Eleanor